Hello and welcome to another episode of Pickle's Garage. Today I want to go over a common issue that I know with these Gen 5 Camaros. So this one specifically is a 2011. So I'm fairly certain that this was definitely an issue with the 2010. Optimistically, you would hope that they would fix this by 2012 or maybe later, but I'm assuming that not a lot of people caught on to the issue until they actually had some ownership. So what this issue is these injectors that are connected by this bolt here go into something that is basically just friction held with the smallest amount of resistance that I could possibly imagine. I'll show you one of these pulled out, but essentially over time, when you're changing spark plugs, which often you should be doing once a year, if you're really driving it, maybe you could push that out, but you should be changing them fairly regularly to maintain, your miles per gallon and your performance. And so what happens is you tighten this and maybe you over tighten it one time, or maybe you're just tightening it normally, and eventually it gets really tight in there, and the resistance for the part it's connected to down on the block is less than the resistance to the bolt in there, and so you end up just spinning this without actually being able to take it out, which is very frustrating because then you can't pull it out. So I'm going to show you kind of a tip on one, how to get it out, but also how to fix it for future issues. Now, when it first happened to me, it was only one of them, and I used this fix about 2 years ago, and it's still performing strong. I've done multiple spark plug changes since then, and it's held up. So maybe there's better ways to do it, but I'm sure there's a lot worse ways to do it. So I'll go ahead and go over the items that you'll need and give you a little bit of a step-by-step. So items needed, fairly straightforward. You're just going to need your regular sort of ratchet with a size 10 socket. You could also use a drill like I have here. This kind of helps with the process that I'm going to talk about, but your run-of-the-mill ratchet with size 10 socket is also going to be helpful. The other things you'll need is something to kind of pry the injector itself up. I would not go too crazy with any sort of crowbar, basically just a angled screwdriver style crowbar is probably going to be your best bet. You don't want to go too crazy with this because you will start damaging things. Also just a regular screwdriver. I know technically you're not supposed to use these for prying, but we all do. And so it is probably going to be the most helpful way to get this up. Now, what I've actually been talking about is this portion. So as you can see, it does have these kind of grooves, you can kind of hear it, that are connected, and that is basically just friction held into the block itself. Now over time, that's just not going to hold up. So basically you'll over tighten it one time, or maybe you'll just tighten it normally, but you'll go to try and loosen it and it will spin here in the actual block before it removes itself with the bolt, and so then it's stuck. So that obviously causes problems, and you're not going to be able to get your injector out, and then you're not going to be able to change your spark plugs. And then obviously high level items that you'll need is 5/8 to remove the actual spark plug and your regular ratchet. So, but that's if you're doing the actual spark plug repair. Today I'm just talking about this specific repair. So again, it has these tiny little brass grooves that go into the block, and as you can see, eventually it just grinds away until it just spins in that housing rather than removing the actual bolt. Super frustrating, but here is the repair. So step one is going to be getting it out. Obviously it's going to be a little bit of a pain, but it's not too bad. So what you need to think about is you are no longer considering the idea that you're going to be able to remove this from this while it's in there. That's no longer a possibility. And so all you're doing now is you're spinning this whole thing, bolts and this included, in order to remove whatever friction it still has. And so you can do that by using the ratchet, you know, just spinning it as many times as you can, or you can do the drill, and then that'll kind of speed up the process. Obviously, some of them are going to be a little harder to do than others. You're not going to have as much room. As you can see with the drill, it started to kind of wear away on other parts of the engine. But you do need to essentially remove any sort of friction left, clean the surface, and that's just going to be by spinning these bolts until it wears away. So once you've done that, you just kind of spin it away. You're going to be sliding the screwdriver up underneath. And so I would do this section, not this section. Anything that has these electronic components to it, it's not going to be a very thick surface area. So if you're trying to wrench with a crowbar or with the screwdriver on here, you're very likely to just break this plastic. Don't want to do that. This is kind of more of like a rubbery material, and so it's got a little bit more give, so it's not going to just immediately snap off, and it's got a little bit more meat to it. So again, you'll just kind of put your screwdriver under here, use some leverage on the block itself to push down, and while you're pushing down, you're going to be either using that ratchet or you're going to be using your drill, and just spin this you know, counterclockwise as much as you can. Eventually it'll pop up. And so I know that's a little concerning, you know, that you're going to be, you know, damaging something, but unfortunately you have to completely damage something in order to do the fix. Now the fix itself is going to be cleaning out kind of the remainder of that dust that will be in here, that debris. And once you've kind of cleaned that out, you're going to buy a product called JB Weld Steel Stick. Now, there's other products that you could buy, I'm sure, that would do something similar. You know, maybe you can even use some sort of high temp super glue. But the reason why I used this is, one, it's good for up to 300 degrees. It's also for connecting metal on metal, you know, bronze on aluminum, copper on brass, all that sort of stuff. And the other reason is because it's a putty, you can kind of mold it how you need to. So what I did on this one, and this is the one I did 2 years ago, still going strong, is I put it in there, you know, wrapped it around the edge itself, and then when I moved the brass into it, I put a little bit of the putty on top as well, so it kind of cocooned it a little bit. And so I'll show you that on this one once I start putting it in. But that sort of flexibility of being able to mold it to what you need is really going to be the secret to it lasting a long time. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this, start molding it, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the brass pin in. Now the other thing obviously is you're not going to have a whole lot of luck with reinserting this to where it'll last if it's still connected to the bolt. And so if you have a vise, I would recommend that. You are going to need to kind of grip it, but you also don't want to damage it anymore. So be careful with the vise, be careful with any tool that you use. Maybe you have some clamps or something that you can grip it with, but that's probably going to be the most careful part, because you don't want to damage this. But you do need to remove it from the bolt in order to kind of get anywhere with it. So maybe some WD-40 or anything you can think of to kind of assist in that removal is going to be best. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the other one, and I'll tell you exactly what I do. In the past, I just used a vise that I had, so I'm probably going to do something similar to that. Alright, so this is probably the best way that I've found so far. I tried it a couple different ways on some of the other ones, but this is kind of the final result. If you would get a vise, hopefully you have one. If you don't have one, it's worth it, honestly. You'll find other reasons for it. It's one of those things that you don't feel like you need, and then all of a sudden you have all these projects that require it because you were struggling before. But basically that's just what I did. I got it really tight on that collar that it has. That way you don't destroy these threads too much. I tried to wrap it with a rag when I was doing it on kind of just the threads, and it was still, you know, galling it up. So just do it on the collar, nice and tight. The other thing is, trying to multitask here. Let me hold it. Sorry for the bad camera angle for a second. You also, if you do vise it, you just want to do these openings. You want to do it kind of like that. So you don't have the openings like this. That way, if you happen to vise it like that, or even like this, you'll end up closing those, and that'll just make it worse because it'll tighten around the bolt. So that is really just the best way that I got it so far. Like I said, next step is I'm gonna start getting the putty ready. I'm gonna wrap the putty around this base here, stick it in, and then I'm gonna put parts of the putty on the top, and you'll see that kind of final result here in a second. But if you don't have a vise, I would just get one, but you might have to get a little creative. Alright, so there you go. So I used a little bit more than I was hoping for, so I'll do a little bit less on the next one. Like I said, just kind of clean the surface, wrap it around the brass, try and get it in those 2 grooves, and then, you know, just kind of make it a cup around it. I didn't put any on the bottom, that way it doesn't interfere with any of the threads or the bolt itself. So I just kind of wrapped it around the brass. Push it in, that'll naturally push up the excess, and then just use the excess to kind of make a cap on the top. This cures in an hour, so I'm not going to put the bolt in there just yet. I'm going to let it sit for a little while, and that way, you know, if there are any that happen to be in the threads or something, I'm not going to end up gluing the bolt itself as well. But this has worked for 2 years when I did it previously, so I'm optimistic this will be the solve that is needed. So hopefully, if you have this very, very common issue, this will be the solve for you. So naturally, I'm going to do the rest of them. You don't have to stick around for that, so I'll let you go. All right, have a good one. Thanks for watching.